you love a priest with zeal and bite, really. That's what we need right now, is zeal and bite, and a guy who wants to be a saint. Thank God for Father Larry. Unlike Father Larry, I just had knee replacement surgery, so I'm not going to be like stalking like a lion. I'm going to be standing behind here. And also unlike Father Larry, who gave a wonderful, a needed talk, I'll say. I'm Irish, and I'm a sports writer. So I'm an old sports writer. So what I do is tell stories, and I think what I want to do today with you gentlemen, at least this is a new talk. I normally don't talk to laity about priests. I'm often in seminaries, and I'm actually, believe it or not, being asked to talk to priests. An old washed-up sports writer is asked to talk to priests, but often, I think it's the first time I've been asked to talk to laity about priests and our responsibility, etc. So this is a new talk, new idea. So what I like to do is tell a story, again Irish, kind of get into the things that holy priests and holy laity have done down the millennia. And then thirdly, maybe get into some things practically. This talk is no good if it's not practical that you gentlemen can do for your priests. Father Larry mentioned a few things, and maybe I'll try not to repeat some of the things he got into, but so anyway, I do want to start with a story. Sometimes it's good just to kind of, take the edge off and just sort of settle into the seats and just listen. Hopefully I can, the story penetrates. So really, I was a sports writer, covered Major League Baseball. And after the 98 season, I married my wife, Krista. Krista and I wanted 10 children. Went off to Tuscany, clinked glasses of Chianti, got home. 6 months later, 7 months later, 8 months later, you can have no children. We weren't blessed that way. It's like a guillotine. To a couple like us, desirous of a family of 8, 9, 10, whatever, it's a guillotine. Man, it was rotten. So Krista was the youth minister at her parish in St. Pete Beach, Florida, and she went to her pastor, that was her boss at the time, and she poured it all out. Waterworks. Father, Kevin and I can't have kids. I don't know what to do. I want to do in vitro fertilization. Father, I want to do in vitro. Kevin doesn't want to do it. He's from a Catholic family. He's got a brother who's a priest, an uncle who's a priest. We're messed up, Father. Father told Krista, as long as your conscience is clear and no embryos will be put at risk, go ahead. Krista, I support it. In vitro fertilization is not a bad thing. No. Catholic Church stands alone. In vitro fertilization is never permissible. I don't want to get into the reasons why. But the very thing Father is meant to do, a priest is meant to do, is to take a blue whale-sized cross and ask Kevin and Krista to unite it at Golgotha. Instead, he injected a lie into our marriage. So what happens? We became Hatfield and McCoy. What a way to start your marriage. She'd walk into another room and I'd be happy. We're living on the water, living on the beach. I was covering baseball. Living in Florida, right on the water. But the sun just added sweat. What a way to start your marriage. Hatfield McCoy. One day I said, sweetie, we gotta get out of here. Will you come back to Maryland with me? From Maryland, I got a big Catholic family in Maryland. There's like 100 of us. We're like Mormons. And it used to be Catholics now, but so thank God. Krista said, "Yeah, you know what? We gotta end this mess. We might end up divorced. We're a year in. We can't stand each other. What a way to start your marriage." So we stuffed all the stuff in the back of the U-Haul van, stuck the infertility back in the van too, and took the loneliest I-95 northbound trip ever taken. And of course, what happens when you get home, I thought with all my family and friends that there was going to be some peace. It's going to get good, right? No, because all my sisters and all my cousins and all my old friends are pregnant. It got worse. Worse. Poor Krista from Florida. Met her in Florida. Poor Krista. Used to cry herself to sleep at night. And I couldn't touch her. Couldn't comfort her because I was the enemy. She wasn't budging from her desire that her pastor told her in vitro fertilization is permissible. And I wasn't budging either. So one day, sitting in Beltway traffic, I quit my job as a sports writer. I had covered sports for 10 years and I joined the family business, masonry contracting. I called my uncle, Monsignor Tom Wells. If you knew Monsignor Tom Wells in Washington, D.C., it's a paragon. You line up 100 priests in a row back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and you'd say, which one loves the Eucharist the most? Which one came out of the birth canal with the explosive joy? Who is Marian? Who dives into souls? 90 out of 100 priests, Wells. Sure, I'm his nephew, but if you see priests in D.C. and you ask them about Monsignor Tom Wells, they'll say one of the greatest priests in the history of the diocese. But I didn't call him up because it was going to be 2 against 1. My wounded bride was already upset enough about this child she knew she was told could grow in her womb. So I stiff-armed my uncle, one of my best friends. I grew up in his shadow for 35 years. Traveled the world with him, Ireland a couple times. Drove across country to Colorado, Canada. Spent my childhood with him. Stiff-armed him. You're not touching my wife. But one day it was spiraling out of control, and I didn't want to go home from work. And I called him up. I said, Tommy, man. By the way, I'm going to call him Tommy because that's how I grew up as a little kid, little 5-year-old, called him Tommy. I said, Tommy, man, it's falling apart. He said, I know, it's about time you called me. I said, I know, I'm sorry, I get it. He said, come on over tonight, let's talk about it. I've been waiting for this phone call. I said, good, I'll be there. Let me get home from work, I'll wash up, I'll be there like 7 o'clock tonight. He said, okay, that's good, bring Krista. I said, nope. No, Kevin, bring Krista. I said, well, I'll try. I don't think she's going to come, and I don't want her to come, but I'll try. Got home, told her what the deal was, opened up the passenger side door of my Ford F-150. I said, sweetie, what do you think? She got in, and I never loved her more. Didn't agree with her at all, but she wanted to pick a fight with Father Wells, with Tommy, for the child she was told should grow in her womb. Didn't agree with her, but never loved her more, because she wanted to pick a fight with my uncle for her child. Drove over, not a word spoken. Hour drive. Got out of the car. Tommy, I still remember Tommy was up on the back deck of his rectory in Germantown, Maryland. He's looking down, he's shaking his head. Very funny guy, very sort of sarcastic priest, let's say. Had that Wells humor, and he's looking down like he just caught me eating my 6th powdered donut, and he's like, hey bud, shut it down tonight. Don't say a stinking word. We're getting into some messy stuff. Just shut it down. Walked up the back deck of his rectory, sat down. He pulls out a bottle of cheap red wine. Looks Krista in the eye. Looks me in the eye. Shakes his head. He says, you don't know how lucky you are. What did you say? You don't get it. Kevin, you don't get it. Didn't I tell you not to say a word? You don't know how lucky you are. What are you saying? God has just invited you into the most intimate friendship of your life. He is taking you to Golgotha. I know Chrissy's pregnant. I know Karen's pregnant. Maura's pregnant. I know they're all pregnant. I've been to the house. I've prayed over their bellies. And Krista, sweetie, Krista, I weep for you. And for some reason, in God's strange divine providence, you're experiencing infertility. I broke open a Catholic omnibus on redemptive suffering. He said, proposed within our mysterious plan of our marriage and its seemingly permanent childlessness, that we should bend our will entirely to God's, no matter how disregarded our actions seemed. He said, this is the mystery of the cross. Christ's love subsumed all heartbreak, rage, and desolation and gave it purpose. walling ourselves off in a catacomb of self-pity, it served no purpose. It's going to cave in on us anyway. Tommy encouraged us to set Simon of Cyrene free to go back to his hometown. It was our time now to bear the full weight of the cross. Our opportunity to resign ourselves completely to God's mysterious plan. He did not soften the ground for us. He asked us to walk it like saints. He said the unsayable. Infertility. This stinking, rotten infertility was the complete measure of God's love poured into us. Why? Why? How? How dare you? Kevin, Krista. Because you get to spend the next 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe pray tell 40, 50 years of your life at the top of Golgotha. You get to embrace the crucifixion. You get to nail yourself. Are you going to step in? Krista, the whole night, obviously, she's got the waterworks going. I don't know if she's furious. I don't know if she's getting it. I don't know if she hates him. I don't know anything. Crying the whole time. Last thing he did, first stars are coming out. It's a beautiful night. It was June 6th, 2000. June 6th, 2000. Hugged Krista out in front of my truck. Looked her in the eye, and I never saw my uncle cry in his life. His eyes are tearing up because he knows the stinking sword in Krista's heart. And he knows the dirty, rotten Catholic stuff that he just gave her, this omnibus. And he's crying. He says, sweetie, I'm here for you throughout it all. Whatever you want me, I'm here for you throughout it all. 2 days later in that same rectory, he was stabbed to death. A homeless tree trimmer broke into the rectory in the middle of the night, and it was gruesome. The assistant state attorney in Maryland said it was the most gruesome crime scene that she had ever seen. So the devil is real, gentlemen. We know it. The devil will murder. It's scriptural. The devil will murder. Monsignor Tom Wells was shipping men into the priesthood. Like this Father Anthony that I met the other day, with the help of fasting and prayer and the Holy Spirit, Monsignor Wells was shipping young men into the priesthood. Getting these kids off the tracks, cheating on their wives, drugs, porn, whatever. Tom Wells would grab their face mask. What the hell are you doing? Like Father Larry said, you're going to hell. Father, you can't say that. I'll tell you you're going to hell. 3 weeks later, it's the same old thing. Knock on the rectory door. Father, I was pissed off at you. Father, you'd saved my soul. Can we talk? Sure. I was waiting for you to come. Satan killed him. The day of the funeral, morning of the funeral, Krista came up to me and said, Kevin, I didn't understand it all. I got bits and pieces. What I heard made sense, though. What he said to me made sense, and I'm going to try. I'm going to try and take this ghost inside my womb, these 10 children I wanted, and I'm going to stick them at the top of Golgotha, and I'm going to try and do it God's way. Let's adopt. My God, what a gift. In the middle of hell, what a gift. And life took off. A couple years go by, we adopt 3 children at birth, 3 brats, Gabby, Sean, and Shannon. Life really took off. I mean, it really took off. I wasn't missing sports writing anymore. I was getting into the family business. We've been around since the 1950s. Life was good, man. Life was good. It's 2009. It's 9 years later. I'm at this family retreat. My family's been going for really since the 1950s. It's this retreat house. Sits way up on a cliffside that overlooks a wide expanse of the Potomac River. And I've been going for like maybe 20 years. And I always had this tradition where I would go down to the dock, climb this cliff and go down to the dock on the Potomac. I mean, it's always the first weekend of December. It's a good way to start Advent. It's a great way to kind of get into the Advent season. And I just turned 40 years old. And at this particular retreat, after throwing my suitcase in the room, everywhere I went was this poking awareness. You're too slothful. You know what? You got way too much pride. And guess what, man? You're too comfortable. Your uncle broke it open for you. He gave you the omnibus on what it is to embrace the crucifixion, and you're too stinking comfortable. I wasn't caught up in all mortal sin and all that stuff, I don't think. But I saw wherever I went, benediction, after a talk, a holy hour, maybe I was just walking the grounds. It sits on 200 acres. It's a beautiful place. Was this poking awareness. You're not living out my will. So I went down to this dock at midnight. I always go down around midnight. And it was freezing out. It was in the teens, and it was really windy that night. And it was a full moon, and we're in the country, so you can see the whole Milky Way. And the full moon that night was God's swinging lantern. Yeah, I'm looking at you. You're down here on the dock again. You came last year, and the year before, and the year before, and the year before, and you set these resolutions. But let's be honest, Kevin, the jig is up. This retreat place, it's like an incubator where you want to feel like William Wallace and John the Baptist, and you got all these resolutions. And the first or second, or maybe you'll make it to the third or fourth thing at home that bothers you, it all breaks. The jig is up. Come on, brother. What do you got now? What do you got now? It's like he's sitting on the stool. God's sitting on the stool, stroking his beard, just shaking his head with that smile. Yeah, what do you got? The jig's up, brother. Had to be the Holy Spirit. Never considered this thought my entire life. Had to be the Holy Spirit. God, you're right, I'm 40, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the laziness, I'm tired of the comfort, I'm tired of the half-assing. Man, I got the greatest gifts in the world. I got a wife that bent her will to you. I got kids that are kicking butt. Job's good. Friends, Orioles games, good stuff. God, you sent your son into the world to endure violence, to redeem all of humanity. God, maybe that's what I need. God, send me to the ground. Because maybe what I need is violence. I need a lightning bolt to flatten me. Because maybe then, like your son, in a different way, I could come up changed, redeemed, converted. So God, tonight, very strangely, God, I want you to make it violent. When I fell down to the dock, I remember the waves slapping up against the dock. And I felt this warmth come course through me, because I was raised in a family, a big Catholic family, who was taught God always answers these prayers. And I knew the other shoe was going to drop. I didn't know when, didn't know how, didn't care, but 100% out of 100%, God answers these prayers. Went back to my room with peace, because I knew violence was coming. A month later, almost to the exact ticking second, it felt like somebody took a tomahawk and flung it into the back of my skull. I had an arteriovenous malformation. I had a brain aneurysm. Many people die right away when this happens. Nudged my wife, thank God. She was right there. It was around midnight, by the way. Midnight. I just finished reading a Michael O'Brien novel. Nudged Krista, I said 911. Got up, fell down, started to vomit all over the place. Like, what in the world just happened? I said, yeah, your brain's bleeding out, brother. Brain's bleeding out. Rushed me to the hospital. Nothing was working. All the shunts that kept sticking in my head were clotting. The blood was too much. Kept going up into my groin, trying to embolize it, glue it. Nope. They kept putting me in these CT scans, these CT tubes, those claustrophobic tubes to get to chart the blood. It was like the second or third time. By the way, I had awareness, like mentally, like I couldn't move, I was broken, I couldn't talk, but I could understand. I can understand that I was dying, and they couldn't stop it. So it was like the second or third time, I think it was the third time, they stuck me in this tube, and they gave me a contrast. The contrast is going to give the doctors a better look into my brain to see where the blood is, to see where the malformation, to try and get to it. And while I was in the tube, I guess I had a reaction from the contrast, and I started to vomit. So here I am. I'm thinking I'm going to die of a brain bleed, but no, I'm not. I'm going to choke to death. Imagine that. I'm going to choke to death in this coffin. And guess what wasn't going through my head at that time? So I was thinking, maybe I got another minute, maybe I got 15 seconds, maybe I got 45, maybe I don't know, maybe I'll make it through somehow. But guess what wasn't going through my head that night? The whoppers of sins of my past. Father Larry mentioned it earlier. You know what's going through my head that night? My stinking omissions. Man, Kevin, you didn't love well enough. Kevin, you were too comfortable. Kevin, you were okay, but gosh, you had 3 kids, you had a wife, you had the world, and you were too stinking rotten comfortable. Imagine taking that to the throne of God at Judgment Day. Kevin, I don't want to talk about the college stuff. Yeah, I know you did that. Yeah, you know what? Leave it aside. Remember what your uncle said about the crucifixion? Remember what your uncle said about embracing the cross and going to Christ and living like Christ? Brother. You didn't get it done. Swallowed down the vomit because I wasn't eating anyway. Survived the night. The next day I was given invasive brain surgery, which they didn't want to do because the malformation was too deep in the brain, but I was dying. So they went in, and the surgeon was in there for 7 or 8 hours, and he pulled out and told Krista we can't go any further or he's going to die. We've gotten to some of the bleeds, but we can't get to the main bleed. So this is the day for me to die. And I was incapacitated. I didn't know what the heck was going on, obviously. I had brain surgery. So they stick me back in the neuro ICU room of the 7th floor of the University of Maryland Medical Center in downtown Baltimore. That's where people go to die on this floor. They just die. Krista, my wife, who never left the hospital room, never left it. Never left, well, I should say the floor. She couldn't stay in the room because of terrible stuff going on in there. Krista called up Father Jim Stack. Father Jim Stack was my Uncle Monsignor Wells' best friend. And he had just started a healing ministry. I beg you guys to, maybe afterwards, to read Burst, a book I have back there about how he started his healing ministry. He was humiliated into starting it. Krista calls up Father Stack, a friend of mine, good friend of mine, used to call him Stack Man. My uncle called him Stack Man. Krista said, Father Stack, I don't know if you heard Kevin's dying. You got to get up here. I heard you started a healing ministry? Yeah, Kevin, Krista, yeah. Where are you? Baltimore. I'll be there in an hour. So he picks up his assistant. Driving up to Baltimore from Hinesville, Maryland, to pray in the Divine Chapel, calling on the saints. And I remember none of this, obviously, because I was out of it, incapacitated, but came into my dark neuro ICU room, knelt down by my bed, and if he was here right now, if he had this mic in front of his big fat mouth, here's what he would say. He'd say, Kevin, I went up to you and I said, we've been praying for the saints, we've been asking for the saints' intercession, we've been calling on Mary, calling the Maryland saints, John Newman, Elizabeth Ann Seton, Mother Mary Lang. Kevin, is there any saint that we can call on for you now? You need the saints' intercession. You need to live. And he said that I turned my head. It was all wires everywhere. And I said, yeah, I need Tommy now. And he stood up, like a V8 moment, smacks himself on the forehead, says, so I went to the top of my bed, and he says, hey, bud, and he's calling on his best friend, Monsignor Tom Wells, calling on one of my best friends, my uncle. He He says, hey, bud, your nephew Keggy just asked you to save his life. You got to save his life, man. That's all I got for you. You know he loves you. You know he wants to live. So save his life. And thereafter, if he was standing here, what he saw was lights sort of popping around the ICU room. And the whole temperature of the room changed to like this real cold sort of neuro ICU feel to this all-encompassing warmth. And his assistant almost fainted. And he knew that he was standing in the midst of something that was supernatural. But he said, here's what I knew was a miracle. It's when around your bed was sort of a horseshoe of the heavenly court, and your uncle was standing next to me, Tommy was standing next to me, and that's when I knew it was all good. I knew what Krista told me, I knew what the surgeon was saying, I knew what all the people out in the hallway, what they were saying, but I knew you were healed. Next day they stuck me in one of those tubes and everything was gone. Fluids, malformation, blood, gone. Get out of here. Go home. You're good. I don't know what happened. Get out of the hospital. You're good. Go home. Get well. What happens? What happens? Nothing's the same anymore, and if it is, then you're an idiot. I mean, we know that. But one of the things that happened was, this is a different talk, but in front of me was, in a certain way, was no longer bodies, but souls. You can either see people as souls, speak to them as souls. Construction sites, architects, engineers, bricklayers, you know. The other thing was this. We'll bring it to the theme of the talk today. That's why I talk about the story about two holy priests, one dead, one earthbound, their anointed hands and what they can do, the power of what the priest can do to save, and what the power of a priest can do to damage. My wife's boss. I started to think more about the priest. The priest. The holy priest. And at Mass, so often, when I finally was able to get out of bed and start walking again and going back to work, I saw priests that seemed to be contracepting the things that I needed. Get your butt in the box and get your sins absolved. Start sacrificing more for your wife. Do you make a holy hour ever? Are you fasting, Kevin? Hey, Kev, now that you survived the brain surgery, are you leading family rosaries? Are you a better man? Rather than a bridge to get me to heaven, I kept seeing something that was damming me up. I did not understand. So all these things are clicking and ticking. I'm like, and I'm thinking about my Uncle Tom and Father Stack and what priests do, the anointed hands. And I kept thinking, man, I'd like to be able to write to priests about who they are. They are an expiation. They are victims. They are a living sacrifice. And I am too in my common priesthood, my baptismal priesthood. I am too. I offer sacrifice for them, for the church, my family. Why am I not being told to sacrifice? And I kept thinking, man, I'd like to write to them. You know, that old sportswriter thing comes back, right? And I think, no, you can't tell a priest how to be a priest. You can't do that. And I kept shutting this thing down. I'd go to Mass and the thing would come back up again. And finally, one time, 7, 8 years later, this thing did not go away. And I'd have conversations with Father or the pastor. Like Father Larry said, they weren't condemnatory. You know, we hear about clericalism in the church. Well, I think we have a problem also with laicalism. But they were frank and open conversations. And I thought they were charitable. I mean, because you got to pray over these things, right? You don't go in like a bat out of hell. Nothing. One day I went up to my 3 brothers who I worked with at contracting business and I said, hey man, I want to write a book. I want to write a book to priests about what I thirst for, what I hunger for. My brother's like, what the hell are you talking about, man? You write a book to priests? No one's going to read that thing. I'm like, no, well, maybe they won't, but God has stuck this thing in my heart. So I'll give you 8 months. So I'm going to work for 8 months. Just give me a little time. January 1st, I'll start this thing. I'll try and knock it out. I'll just take a sabbatical. They don't even know what a sabbatical is. They're contractors. So what do you do when you're trying to write a book to priests? An old washed-up sports writer writing a book to priests. Well, that sounds arrogant, right? Well, of course it is. So I began to read the lives of the paragons, the titans, the greatest priest saints in the history of the church. Vianney, Bosco, Neri, Colby, Damien the Leper, John Paul, because I can't write if I don't really get it. Wrote this book. Sent it out to 9 Catholic publishers. All 9 Catholic publishers said, "We don't want your book." Well, why? What's wrong? What did I do wrong? Well, you can't tell a priest how to be a priest, Kevin. I said, "Yeah, I know. This is for what I'm thirsting for. I've been sitting on this one for 7 or 8 years, and yeah, we kind of get what you're doing. You're showing what you're hungry for, but we don't want your book." Well, what a big loser I am. Taking a sabbatical, convincing my wife, kids, unpaid. What a big fat loser I am. You discerned wrong, right? You discerned wrong. And something wonderful happened to me. Not for the world, but for me. The Washington Post broke a story in June of 2018. Cardinal McCarrick has been abusing boys. And the publishers began to call back. The book was released on the Feast of the Assumption in 2019, and not because of a washed-up sports writer, but because of God, it became an immediate Catholic bestseller. I guess Providence had something to do with it, timing. It began to be read by priests and laity throughout the country, and really, believe it or not, throughout the world, and something unbelievable happened. Something I couldn't have conceived of 1,000 years. I began to get letters and emails and phone calls from priests, not only from America, but from outside of America. Bishops. What'd they say? Dozens. What'd they say? I guess I can crystallize it this way. The first contact I got was an email from an Anglican priest in England. And he said, "Kevin, your book was in my rectory. I don't know how. I'm not even Catholic. I didn't want to read it. You're a sports writer. You're this clown." But something told me to read this book. 21 years ago, I wanted to be like this Vianney that you wrote about. And I think, humbly, I think I was. I was always in the parish. I was always praying for my parishioners. I was in homes. I wanted to be a holy Anglican priest. And a few years into it, my brethren started to poke fun at me. They said I smelled like incense, and I was a church mouse, and I was holy roller priest. And I bought in, and I took my foot off the accelerator, and I read your book. And your words humiliated me. Shame on me. Your words reoriented me to who I am. I am the slaughtered lamb. I am Jesus Christ for my flock, and I must be uncomfortable, and I must strive to be a saint for my parishioners. Thank you. Kept coming. Kept coming. Guys, why did these priests reach out to an old washed-up sports writer? I don't know anything. I'm not a theologian. Cover baseball. As a sports writer, I covered some of the greatest athletes who ever lived. I covered Michael Jordan as a basketball player and a baseball player. I covered Shaq. I covered Ripken, Griffey Jr. I covered a lot of the great ones. Not a single one of them that became the greatest players in their respective sports didn't suffer and sacrifice and bleed to become the very best that they could be. They were never comfortable. What was I thinking in that MRI tube? Man, you were comfortable. Guys, we have to wrap our heads around the fact that Jesus Christ was never comfortable. He was the poor man of Nazareth. He had nowhere to lay his head. He was butchered. We are in a long winter time in the church that has just begun. Societally, we are collapsing. We simply can no longer, if we are, can no longer be comfortable in our common priesthood. And I have to imagine here on September 23rd, 2023, that all faithful priests that are here, and you faithful laity, Connecticut men, that you're leaning in a certain way towards a martyrdom because of what's going on in our world, in our church. Because a single wall, we got to get real, a single wall seems to split the entire world now. There's an ongoing, systematic attack on truth and God's natural laws, and it surges more powerfully every day, and it is violent. To men of Bridgeport, it's growing. It's oceanic. A single wall splits the entire world today. On one side are those who genuflect to God. On the other side are those who genuflect to the world. One side, willing saints rise or try to rise. On the other side, demons are roaming. This is not metaphor. This is literal stuff. One side worships an eternal God. The other, a God that is green-lighted and blessed depravity and mortal sin. It's growing. One side are those devoted to prayer. The other side are those who never pray. One side fights one's nature, like you guys, fights one's nature to achieve virtue and grow in holiness. The other gorges his body to attain comfort. One side dies to self and lives. The other lives for self and dies. Like a deadly and unseen black mold, the wrong side of the wall is growing in velocity and scope. Guys, we gotta face it. The spirit of the age is winning. And man, every one of you guys, I imagine you want to be on the edge of your seat. Because it's clear now. Gazing at the wider contemporary world, the Catholic Church is losing. Now, we know ultimately the Church reigns victorious, but many, 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 many souls, as Father Larry said, are headed to hell. This anti-God zeitgeist has settled in the world like an invisible World War II chlorine gas. We cannot see it, but if we could see the supernatural warfare, if we could crane our necks and look into the blue sky, I imagine what we would see now is black flapping wings, especially since the end of COVID, in my opinion, if I can give an opinion here. So, as it relates to the theme of today's talk, I think it's providence. This focused on the priesthood, because we need to make things practical. Let's make it practical for God. Let's propose divine and beautiful things to step into these days and support and serve God's faithful priests and His church. You know, I was saying that I was reading the lives of those priest saints, and I kept coming into these 8 characteristics that they all seem to share in common. Bosco, Neri, Vianney, all the guys, 8 characteristics. I write about them in the book, and I tell stories. These are the same 8 characteristics that all of us need to have, should have to have, as Father Larry says, to get to heaven. So before discussing these 8 characteristics, I want to tell you, or share, I guess, a dynamic in prayer. This kind of came to me about what a healthy, fruitful relationship between the priest and his strong lay member is. On the final day of the 1998 baseball season, I was in the Yankees clubhouse. Who Yankees fans? Very good. Yeah, you guys are second to last place. Oh, did I say that? If I'm saying that, I'll remind you my Orioles are in first place. Touche. He said it took him a long time. Touche. Yeah, but we're here. Okay. So I was in the Yankees clubhouse, and the Yankees that year in '98 were arguably the greatest team in baseball history. They had tied the Tigers for 114 wins in the season. They were just dominant. And in this clubhouse, my editor said, I want you to preview our playoff coverage by interviewing one of the game's rising stars. So this clubhouse had Mariano Rivera, Pettit, O'Neill, Tino Martinez, Strawberry was in that clubhouse, Tim Raines, they brought him in to help out, veteran presence. But it was a 24-year-old who was his leader, and every one of the 25 in the clubhouse knew it. Who was it? Jeter. Of course it was Jeter. So Jeter sat down with me. I explained to him my problem. I said, I know you don't want to talk to me. You want to get back to New York. They were in Tampa Bay. You want to get back to New York? Can you give me some time? He said, sure, sit down. So we talked for about 30 minutes, which is rare. 30 minutes. You know, he just struck me as uncommonly mature and humble. Just a grinder who was a team man. He told me that day, he said, until I go errorless for the season and go 600 for 600 without making it out, I'm never going to be satisfied. I'm always going to strive for that season. But something else jumped out. His love and respect for Joe Torre. For those who aren't baseball fans, Joe Torre was the manager of that Yankees team. So after the interview, I went into Torre's office and I said, Mr. Torre, that guy out there, I've never seen anything like it. He said, yeah. I said, how is he already the leader of this club? He's 24. You got Strawberry, who's 38. Raines is 37. Mariano, I said, Kevin, next time there's a pitching change, I want you to see what happens. What happens? As I'm walking out, obviously there's some anxiety because our starter's struggling. We got relievers getting hit around a little bit, batting practice, so I got to take the pitcher out. Who's the first one on the mound? It's Derek Jeter. And what does Derek do? Every time I come to the mound, he takes his glove and he punches me in the chest and he looks me in the eye and he says, don't worry about this, Mr. Torre. We're going to take care of this for you. We're going to get you out of this. Let's think for a minute about what Jeter used to express to his manager out on the mound. Countless, hundreds of times that punch on the chest with those words. 20 years. Think of your relationship with your pastor in the way that Jeter regarded Torre. The theme of today's retreat is the priesthood, God's gift and our responsibility. Let's talk about the responsibility part. Just imagine you get a new pastor and he's inherited your scuffling parish and is a board laity, checked out, parish community, but you get this sense that this priest wants to turn your parish into a sacred place. You sense that your pastor wants to be like Vianney. He just wants to chase down souls. I'm here to say that this holy priest, more than ever before, he needs you men. Not in a silly way. He needs you men, like Father was saying, to be his friend. Before the 98 season, Torre and Jeter made an agreement. Torre knew what he had that year. Torre knew what he had with that team. To work intimately with one another. Torre knew that Jeter was the new young. He was only 23 at the time. You're going to be my captain. Let's get to know each other. They got to know each other intimately. This wasn't a relationship just meant for the clubhouse, the dugout, or a game time relationship that they shared. This was a manager-player relationship that was active throughout the year. Jeter did not detach from his manager in the off-season. He worked with him. They shot the breeze. They talked on the phone. Jeter listened to whatever was on Torre's mind. Jeter understood in a way that did not have to be expressed that Torre needed him. He needed his ear, his openness, his perspective. And it took Jeter extra work, extra time, sacrifice, and vulnerability. But Joe Torre was his leader. So Jeter worked hard for him. So men, as Father Larry was saying, we got to invest time in helping our pastor. He needs our spiritual support. He needs your spiritual support, willingness to volunteer for ministries. He needs your friendship. You got to be his wingman at this parish, especially if you got a little John Vianney in your hand. Jeter and Torrey respected each other's complementary roles. Jeter never tried to conflate his role with Torrey's. He never tried to manage the Yankees. As captain, he understood the dignity of Torrey's role, the burden of his responsibility that Joe Torrey had, and he did whatever he could to help his manager lead the Yankees towards something excellent. You know, at times, and these things happen, Jeter was frank and open with Torrey, even occasionally offering fraternal correction in private. And Jeter needed fraternal correction too from Torrey. Jeter at that time was dating one of the world's most beautiful women, very famous. Remember the day I was interviewing, he was on the front cover of GQ. He was the guy. That's back when he was the guy. He used to be on these Steinbrenner commercials with American Express, I think. But Torrey said, hey man, you're the new face of the Yankees. You got to keep things tight. We all need to have our face masks grabbed. We kind of forget about fraternal correction. I need my stinking face mask grabbed. I thank God I have a lot of priest friends. I guess because I've written some books about priests. I've met priests from throughout the country. Nothing is better for me than when my face mask is grabbed and reorients me. Almost like those priests that read this book and said, man, you dropped the bomb. And by the way, it's not me. I just held up the precincts. That's all I did. I'm just a reporter. Joe Torrey and Derek Jeter, by the way, guys, you might know this, they're Catholic men. They know right from wrong. Catholic men keep each other in check. Priest to laity, and sometimes laity to priest, with charity. So, with this Jeter-Torrey dynamic in mind, I'm going to hold those 8 characteristics of the holy paragon, of the holy priest saint, but they're ours too, they're mine. When I wrote this book, I was kicking myself in the teeth. It was a kick in the teeth. Sure, I was writing to priest what I thirsted for, but it was like God was writing into my heart, Kevin, I thirst in this for you. So let's get into characteristic number 1. Oh, fancy screen up there, guys. Catholic priest and a strong Catholic man adores the Eucharistic face of Jesus. One of my closest friends is a priest named Father Dan Leary. 4 years ago, he went up to his cardinal in D.C. and he said, hey, can you release me? What are you talking about, Father? You've been here 23 years. Yeah, I know. I want to go to the poorest of the poor. What? Yeah, I want to go to the boys' towns and girls' towns and all over the world, be the chaplain of the most bullied kids in the world, sexually abused, physically, that have endured the violence of poverty, the ones that have been ripped to shreds by poverty. Will you let me go, Cardinal? Your Excellency, Your Eminence. Oh, if that's what you want. Father Dan, 365 days a year, no beach vacation, no golf, no climb up the mountains to get some fresh air. 365 for 20,000 kids in 6 different countries. 6 to 8 hours of confession every day. Spiritual direction for 2 or 3 hours. Year-long ongoing retreats for the Sisters of Mary, the 360 Sisters of Mary who take care of these kids. 2 or 3 masses every day. When you get into the wounds of 13-year-old girls that have been touched up by touchy-feely uncles at the age of 6 for 10 years, for 4 years, 5 years, the wounds are crazy glued to the soul. So it's not just the confessions and the masses and the rosaries and the catechism. It is getting into the demon, holding it up and saying, sweetie, you're a princess of God. You're a virgin. No, Father, you don't understand what it was like. No. Do you trust Father? Yeah. Can I trust you, Father? Yeah, you can. Yeah, you're a princess. You're a virgin. Father, yeah, just walk with me now because it's time to heal. All day long, travel the world doing this. One day I asked him, I was down in Chaco, Mexico, where there's 3,000 girls. And I said, Father, man, what's up? How do you do this? You work every day, 17, 18 hours, every stinking day. Here's what he said. I stick my nose in front of the monstrance at 4 a.m. every day. I stick my nose there until the kids wake up. So I'm there for 2 hours. And then their alarm bell goes off. And I get up. And as I get up, I say, okay, you're my strength for one more day. He said it is the only fuel that he has to keep him going. As I mentioned earlier, I'm friends with priests from all over the country at this point. I don't know of any of these priest friends that don't commit themselves to at least 1 hour of adoration every day. I'm not going to go into the reason why. When I give talks in seminaries, I tell them, if they're not committed to a daily holy hour right now in the incubator as little babies, they're not committed to a daily holy hour, that they might want to leave the room. Matter of fact, you might want to just leave your vocation. If you don't think that silent time in front of Jesus Christ, where he can speak to your soul, your heart, and equip you for this dragon of a world that you're going to face when you become a priest and wear that collar, in this time of societal and moral collapse, if you're not doing that, then you don't love Jesus. And you don't know what it is to be a priest. And you don't know what Jesus most wants from you, seminarians. He wants you to stick your nose in front of him because he wants you to keep time with him. So you can beg him, I don't know how to be a priest. Jesus, tell me how in the silence of my heart. I do think, gentlemen, the reason it's number one, for us, time spent in adoration, I think now is as important a move that we can do to becoming holy. I think it's indispensable for a Catholic man. Why? Because the unspoken voice of Christ in adoration works to lead us to holiness, inner peace, and intimate friendship with God. As hardworking and busy men, I know we all work. I think we just have to carve out time. Just to get in front of him. Once a week if we can, twice a week if you can. But just to get in front of him, shut it all down. The work, the concerns with the wife, all that stuff, shut it all down. You don't need no Bible, no rosary, just shut it all down. Jesus, I'm here. Characteristic number 2, a priest is devoted to Mary. A Bridgeport, Connecticut faithful Catholic man is devoted to Mary. There's a priest named Monsignor John Esseff. Show of hands, Monsignor John Esseff. 95-year-old mystic, soul reader, renowned for reading souls in Scranton, Pennsylvania, whose Mother Teresa's confessor and spiritual director overseas for 8 years. He had a bilocation from Padre Pio in 59 in Italy. Teaches exorcists how to be exorcists. Been a priest for 75 years. I said, how do you do it? Mary, what do you mean? Well, Kevin, I picture myself as Jesus at the fourth station. So I'm Jesus there, and I've fallen down. And the cross is on top of me, and I'm all beaten up and broken. I got blood. I can't see out of my eyes because of the sweat. I'm a nasty mess. I got blood all over me from the scourging. And I fall down, and who's there? Mom's there. Thank God Mom's there. Mom's going to give me some of that maternal love. Mom's there. Get up. Huh? You get up, John. You get up and finish this. Redeem all of humanity. I know it hurts. I know it's bad. I know this plan is tough, but get off the ground. And Kevin, Mary reaches down and picks me up. And I say, yeah, that's my life as a priest. I'm the slaughtered lamb. And I walk up the hill and I keep serving. Do we have that perspective with Mary? When we pray our rosary, is it just kind of seeing Mary in the manger, smile on her face? Or is Mary like men? I'm fed up. What don't you get about my apparition sites? What don't you get about my message? What don't you get about my stinking rotten tears that will not stop? Men, help me. Number 3, a priest prays devoutly. Father Martin Flume, at COVID, it's already the most prayerful priest I knew. At COVID, masses were canceled. He spent his life in his church in front of the exposed Blessed Sacrament. His life was one consistent prayer. It's where he lived, in the church. He's got a beard down to his belly. Holy as the day is long. Mortifies his body, mortifies his emotions. Does penances that are just remarkable. Of course he doesn't say it, but rumors get out there. Church is reopened. He hears throughout the Diocese of Washington, hey man, Father, you getting the same thing I'm getting? Yeah, only 40% are back. Yeah, Father, you know what, I got 65. Yeah, man, I'm down at 30. 30% are back. So what is this man, this Father Martin Flume, who spent 6 months living in front of the Blessed Sacrament, in front of Jesus, the monstrance? What does he do? He knocks on the chancery door. I think this Cardinal Gregory might be getting tired of this. Your Eminence, I'd like to turn my life over to become a consecrated hermit. What? Yeah, I feel the need to offer the rest of my life to God as a sacrifice, as a victim. Our church is suffering now. And now I give myself over as an expiation for priests and for laity, that they might come back. Today, Father Martin Flume, a year and a half later, lives in a cell no longer bigger than your childhood bedroom, where his entire life is a prayer. Oh, and severe penances and mortification. Why? Why? Because he gets it, but because he knows what prayer does. So Father Dan Leary, my boy, Father Dan down in Mexico, Guatemala, Tanzania, all over Brazil, he's with 20,000. Father Flume's with nobody. 20,000, nobody. Father Flume, I believe, to be one of the most important people in the world because he has embraced the crucifixion and offered his life to Jesus, begging, bring it back. Heal this church. Bring it back. Guys, the interior life is everything now. Prayer is everything now. Like Father Flume, let's take our prayer life more seriously. I need to take my prayer life more seriously. The victimhood is the next one. That's Father Flume. That's Father Dan. Are we victims? Are we sacrificial to our families? The rest of the 4, availability, carpe diem, prophetic, being a father. I'm running out of time, so I can't go too much into those 4. They're laid out here. The dirty little secret about the priests we need to save the church, it's the laity. Remember that quote that Sam read? It's the laity, working with priests. These are the 8 characteristics that the common priesthood, Bridgeport, Connecticut men, need in equal sharing with our priests. We own it too, guys. We're not off the hook. So, with that said, gentlemen, I'm with Father Larry. The priest is healthy, or I should say the church is healthy when the priest is healthy, and oftentimes when does the priest get healthy? when he has wingmen in his corner. Last thing, if father's not getting it right, I got that. I've left my parish, I've left my diocese, I got that. But you better believe that I had conversations, man-to-man conversations, again, charitable, about, Father, will you die for my family? Your Excellency, will you die for my family? Will you help me now? So if you have that, go on. And if you have a young priest, my gosh, if you have a young priest, build that priest up and support him, because the lions are surrounding him. Be his wingman. Guys, thank you very much.